200 nations will sit down together and renegotiate the final text of what they will sign at the end of the week.
Fox's Alex Hogan in London. An early draft of the report calls for countries to cut emissions in half by 2030. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry told the conference there won't be any more coal-fired plants in the U.S. by then. 48 hours after astronauts returned to Earth wearing diapers because their SpaceX craft's toilet was broken, a new crew in a ship with a working toilet will blast off.
If the schedule holds and the weather cooperates, it will lift off shortly after 9 p.m. Eastern Time and ferry 4 astronauts, 3 Americans from NASA and 1 German from the European Space Agency, to the space station. These 4 crew and their capsule, named Endurance, are intending to stay in space for at least 180 days.
That's Eben Brown. I'm Dave Anthony. This is Fox News.
WPTV First Alert Weather on WSTU is brought to you by Code Red Roofers. Code Red Roofers cares and calls you back. Shows up and finishes on time. 287-2829. Code Red Roofers, the roofers who respond. Now here's the First Alert meteorologist.
This afternoon, highs in the low 80s, partly sunny skies, and some passing showers possible throughout the day. Tomorrow, highs in the low 80s, more clouds and some scattered afternoon to evening showers and storms. Friday, mild and muggy with highs in the low 80s. Our next cold front starts to move in, bringing us the chance for scattered showers and also some thunderstorms. I'm WPTV First Alert meteorologist Katya Hall for WSTU 1450, Martin County's Heritage Station.
You are listening to WSTU, Stewart, Jensen Beach, Hope Sound, Martin County's Heritage Station.
It's time now for the Casey Ingram Show on WSTU. The opinions expressed are those of the program host and guest and not necessarily those of WSTU. WSTU does not endorse products that may be mentioned. Any reproduction or retransmission of this broadcast is strictly prohibited without written consent of WSTU. It's time to call in with your questions and comments at 220-9788, 220-WSTU. And now, here's Casey Ingram.
Well, here we are. Happy Hump Day once again here on our beautiful Treasure Coast. We have a great show on tap. We're going to be talking about Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, 2050, and a lot of good information coming out. But before we do, I always have to reach out and say thank you to my sponsors. And first off, Indiantown Marina. It's just the best marina here in Martin County. A lot of great things are happening out there, but they are a do-it-yourself and full-service boatyard. Very few offer both of those services. Indiantown Marina does. So you have best of both worlds when servicing your boat. Electrical, mechanical, prop and shaft work, bottom painting, complete boat painting, and boat sitting, and so much more. So you can give them a call at 772-631-3272. And again, that's the good folks at Indiantown Marina, 631-3272. Forbearances, working remotely, internet shopping, retail space, and rental income have been hit hard by COVID. If you are looking to restructure your debt, obtain financing or equity, Commercial Mortgage can help you out. Tim Mullen at Commercial Mortgage has been providing debt restructuring services since 2003. Tim never charges a front fee and all consultations are free. Tim only gets paid if he provides you a debt workout. Looking for a debt solution or financing? Give Tim a call at 772-872-6099. That's 872-6099. Or visit commercialmortgagellc.com to schedule your free consultation. And also, what is the best kept secret in Martin County? Well, it's the Fish House Art Center. And you can find the Fish House Art Center in Port Salerno. Cute little spot. Eric, you've been out there. It's just a wonderful little...
I live down in Rocky Point, around Sarah Hurd's neck of the woods.
Yes.
Actually, she was out running one morning, and I was on my way to work and almost hit her with my Volvo.
Oh, dear. Oh, dear.
Yeah, no, her hands ended up on the hood of my car.
Oh, my
True
goodness.
story.
You owned a Volvo?
I owned a Volvo.
And that's what Jim gets out of this story. But back to the Fish House Art Center. It's a wonderful place. You can come by boat, by car, stroll the boardwalk, explore the best kept secret has to offer. Features local artists, an Airbnb, art gallery, boat charters, marina, craft and creamery with craft beers, wine, and 24 flavors of ice cream. So there is something there for literally everybody. So you can reach out to the folks at the Fish House Art Center at 772-221-5482. Visit them online at thefishhouseartcenter.com and see all the fun things that are happening out there. And a little reminder as well for the Martin County Fair, they had the Carnival of Lights. I'm really excited about that because it's the first time we're doing this here in Martin County. They're having a Carnival of Lights right at the fairgrounds, and it's great family fun. Every weekend beginning November 26th up until Christmas. Runs Fridays through Sundays from 5:30 to 9. And they'll have music, crafters, food, rides. The Model Railroad Club is out there and so much more. And the admission is just $10. And if you're 12 and under, it's free. So you can visit Martin County Fair for more information on that, 220-3247. And they are also looking for sponsors to come out there and put up some Christmas trees and help make it even more festive and merry.
I had a question for them.
Sure.
Since there's a beer tent at the fair, will there be a spiked eggnog tent at the Christmas of Lights Festival?
Jay Spicer. I have to find out about that one.
Call Jay and find out.
That's right, Jay Spicer. I think the spiked
See if we can
eggnog
get
bowl
Captain
might be a good
Morgan
one.
To sponsor
That's
one
right.
Yeah, there we go.
I like that. So
Sounds like maybe it's a good time to get a food truck out there, right?
So in the studio today, to my right, of course, with Talk About Martin, we have Eric Miller. And appreciate you coming in again, as always, Eric.
Love it.
And in the center, back in center, as they will say, we have Jim Stack. And very excited about this show. Again, we were talking about Agenda 21, globalism. Right now, they're talking about the Great Reset with COVID. There's so many things that are happening here recently that really are eye-opening, and it ties right in with Agenda 21. For example, the vaccine passports, vaccine requirements. And this isn't about whether or not you should or shouldn't get a vaccine. It's, are you requiring us to carry a passport now? Many hospitals now, if you need an organ transplant, they won't give it to you unless you have the vaccine. I mean, this is all part of what's tied into what is Agenda 21. So
Jim is a definite expert in the field. I've known Jim for 20 plus years. Jim and I have worked together on quite a few different projects, and he knows his stuff when it comes to this. And the thing is about Jim, he's steadfast. He knows the truth in this, and he will present. And I'll hush here in a minute, but he will present in his own words to us all of the reality that goes behind what people since the 90s have been calling a conspiracy theory. Well, the theory wrapper is gone at this point, boys and girls. For anybody that's willing to open their eyes, look at the books that the people that were supposedly the conspirators were writing, and Jim will bring those to you, and he'll show you how they've gotten into your educational system and everything else, down to the local government, like our garbage trucks with Martin County. It's beyond a conspiracy theory. It is now a conspiracy. And for the people that are rolling their eyes out there, remember there are points in history prior to this young democratic republic that we live in, that have had overthrows, that have had political movements, the Bolshevik movement. Look at a lot of different movements through China. People and human nature don't change, and we are actually living through one of the most incredible times in world history right now. Tell me what McKinley is known for. He was maybe a president, if most people knew that. But right now is a time they're going to write about, not McKinley's time, because there are some things happening here with the advent of technology bringing everybody together, the control that they have on tracking, the financial overreach that they have on everything, and your freedoms are being taken from you piece by piece by piece. And Jim is a true expert in explaining what these pieces are and how they fit together. And again, this has gone way beyond a conspiracy theory, folks. You are living in the middle of something that they're going to write about. So enjoy watching the writing on the wall and Jim Stack.
So, folks, Jim Stack, we're going to hear from him shortly. If you have a question for Jim, the phone number is 772-220-WSTU, 220-9788. I'm also watching the Facebook live feed on the Casey Ingram Show page, and always your questions and comments, I will pass those on as well. So, Jim, for those that don't know, what is Agenda 21? Let's start at the very basics.
Well, let me just say one thing. If President McKinley was alive today, he'd be sitting right next to me. And I'll start with that. But Agenda 21, and this is the actual document, it's a global plan put together by globalists and sold to the public as a way to manage the planet and all the people on it in order to save the Earth from pollution and climate change, which back then they called global warming. Now, they make it look like it's a bottom-up type of thing, and that's part of their strategy, but it's also a top-down plan, and it's coming at you from the bottom up, top down, and from 1,000 different angles. And the reason why people don't see it is it's in 1,000 different pieces. So you'll see a piece, you'll see a piece, you'll see a piece, and you won't be able to put them together. I'm going to try to put it together by showing you their books, their stuff. They actually write and tell you what they're doing, but it's never presented in the press. They have their own different universe going on where they communicate with each other, they write books to each other, they have conferences all the time. It's not like you had the COP26 conference going now. They've been going on forever. And the original COP conference basically was started by Prince Charles way, way back in the early 90s. And he's part of this discussion today. He's a player, and a big player, right? As goofy as he is. And he's also a main player in the Great Reset, which is the current Agenda 21 plan.
Definitely
it's
want
the
to get
culmination
into that.
of it.
Definitely want to. Jim, can you put your headphones on for a second? We
Sure.
have Charlie from Palm City here on the line.
Sure.
Charlie, are you with us?
Yes, I am, and I totally agree with the gentleman. I know that they're trying to get the UN involved, or the UN is involved.
Yeah, they are, Charlie. They're already involved. But they're the front
organization. You
organization.
sound like a New Yorker, and I'm a New Yorker, too.
A long time ago, Charlie. I'm surprised it shows.
Also, this Bitcoin business, I mean, everything is trying to destroy the U.S. dollar.
Yes.
That's the... go ahead. You wanted to say something?
Well, let me address that, Charlie. This whole globalist plan, they have a credo. They have a belief. Globalism is an ideology. Globalism does not believe in the nation state.
Yeah, it's a religion.
Yeah, and it's more than that. It's a political ideology. It's a religious ideology. It's a cultural ideology, and basically they're involved in everything that we do and say. And receive through the airwaves and stuff, and we don't even know they're doing it. So the ideology says, look, no more nation states, open borders, free trade, right, and global education, global sustainable development education, which we're receiving, and you name it, culture, ecclesiastical, they're involved in all of it. And even the late Senator Barry Goldwater pointed out a lot of this in 1979 before Agenda 21 even showed up on the scene. Anything else, Charlie, that I can...
Well, and I'm years and years ago, 1973, I taught school, 4th grade, and they're going after our children.
Absolutely.
With the indoctrination,
that's Common Core.
Brainwashing, you name it. It's really despicable.
Common Core, which they were pushing years ago, was a globalist program. Yep. And people started rising up against it. And, of course, all of these people, they're wearing tinfoil hats, they're conspiracy theorists. But one of the main things in Common Core, which the anti-Common Core people pointed out, was American history starts with the Civil War. There is no founding of the nation. There is no founding documents of the nation. So we have, again... gets back to their ideology of no more nation state.
History, taking down the monuments.
Yeah. They sure are. Yeah. They sure are.
Clean the slate. It's a shame. I'm a Vietnam vet. I fought for our country.
Good for you,
and
Thank you
my
for
father
that.
was an officer under Reich. My son served in Desert Storm. We serve America, and they're lying to us. We need to stand up. That's why I became a libertarian.
Yeah, well... They control pretty much the political process. So
I know, and they're flying around in their private jets talking about global warming. It's Chicken Little's in charge. The sky is falling.
Charlie, thank you so much for your service.
Enjoy the rest of the show. I think you're going to find it.
Yes.
All right.
Thanks for calling in.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you for your service.
Bye.
Okay, so we've established it's a global plan.
Right.
So, and it actually goes back to Woodrow Wilson, but we're going to jump right up into 1987 when the term sustainable development is first introduced to the world. And it comes out of this. This is their book. It's called Our Common Future, and it's the World Commission on Environment and Development. This book was published in 1987. It's a report from what is known as the Brundtland Commission. Gro Harlem Brundtland was Prime Minister of Norway, and she was also Vice President of the World Socialist. And this report is a global agenda for change, and the commission was formed in 1983. And they got people from all over the world to give their input. So the commission received advice and support from thousands of individuals, institutes, organizations from all over the world, including a guy from the United States called William K. Riley. He was in the EPA at the time, Environmental Protection Agency. Remember that name, it's going to come up again. So what did the commission come up with? They said sustainable development. They coined the term and they coined the definition. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Wow. So how do you do that? Well, basically, you need a global management system. That's what the Great Reset's all about today. Prince Charles is talking about it. Okay, so how do you get there? Well, we need to rally the people of the earth around degradation of the world's resources and the environment and global warming. Now, how? Global warming is like, it's front and center. We got to save the planet. How do you do it? Oh, I don't know. The answer is within all of these books. So we jump forward a couple of years, and in 1995...
Jim, can I interrupt you for 1 second? You're just talking about the Great Reset, and you said Prince Charles just mentioned it. You know, also, folks, I mean, this is real. In November 2020, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, quote, "This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset. This is our chance to accelerate our pre-pandemic efforts to reimagine economic systems that actually address global challenges like extreme poverty, inequality, and climate change."
That is Agenda 21.
Here, how about this one, Jim? Am I up, Rick? Thank you. How about this one, Jim? President Joe Biden at the last COP, what are we on now, 26?
Sure.
Yeah, 26, COP 26. He stands at the podium and he says that he is now partnering with the World Economic Forum.
Right.
And he is forming several public-private partnerships in key industries to be able to work with American corporations now to transform our economic system.
Right.
Transform. Can we stop and have a conversation
Right.
about this,
What
please,
does
guys?
that mean?
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
right.
not now, but I mean,
Right.
before
Our
we
country.
start transforming our economic system, do you think the people might want to have a conversation? How are the people getting left out of this so badly, and how have we not known about it?
Well, let me just jump forward. First of all, that's not Joe Biden's idea. That's Prince Charles' idea in 1990. 2 years before the conference in Rio, where Agenda 21 document was given to the world, right? Prince Charles was holding meetings on his yacht, inviting all the corporate, what they called international companies at the time, all the big ones, Coca-Cola, IBM, hundreds of them. And what they did was they come up with the ideas like, we are going to manage the world's resources and its people. And we're going to form public-private partnerships in order to do this. Now, this is in 1990. That got it off. He hasn't stopped. He's been doing this forever. And, you know, he comes off as Charles the environmentalist and Charles the New Age guy. But in the meantime, what we're experiencing today, he set in motion. And he was only one globalist that was doing this. But all of these corporations that signed on to it back then, most of them are still around. Some of them have gone over or merged and made mega corporations. But Charles was the one that started that. He was the front man, and he still is. There was, Glenn Beck was talking about this about, 2 weeks ago, to where, last week actually, where Joe Biden announced that he's going to have global corporations manage the 20 major industries of the world, and that it includes mining and pharmaceuticals, and they were going to manage everything for basically the Great Reset. So this is what they're calling now is a global public-private partnerships, global corporations now in charge of everything we say, do, read, see on TV, the stuff that we put in their body. Bill Gates is part of this. They admit it.
Well,
Right?
Facebook comes to mind. We all speak and socialize, and if you're watching the show now, you're on Facebook.
Yeah.
One entity that is truly, we saw with the last election how much it was controlling the narrative.
But if you say the wrong thing, you're off Facebook.
That's right.
Right.
You are.
And you're not going to be on the 6 o'clock news either.
James McGovern says degrowth is a good example. Degrowth.
Oh, degrowth. Oh, yeah. Well, that's part of their strategy, too. Degrowth, which basically, that came out of Agenda 21 also, and depopulation. Because if you're going to have degrowth and there's not going to be enough resources for the population to use, the current population, you have to have less population. This is stuff that they write. I've got their book here. I'll let you have this. Degrowth and all of that is in this book, State of the World. This is the State of the World. They come out once a year. Basically, it was started by Gorbachev. He used to have State of the World conferences way back in the 80s and the 90s. And every year they come out with a journal. They get the best brains in the world to write about sustainability and global governance. This is one of their publications. The 2012 edition, this report, is one of my favorites. They've got Mayor Bloomberg in there. He was mayor, and they're bragging about how he's implementing Agenda 21 in New York. Do New Yorkers realize that? No, they didn't. All of his things about the eating too many French fries and drinking the sugary sodas, that's part of it.
Part of it.
Right?
Jim,
it sounds goofy, but it is.
Jim, while Bloomberg was doing that in New York, weren't we doing that here in Marshall County?
I'll get into that. I'm saving that.
Okay, sorry.
That's my home run.
Don't want to take.
I'm
fire.
saving that. All right. No, I'll take it. Anyway, we jump forward to 1995 when this report comes out called Our Global Neighborhood. It's a report from the Commission of Global Governance. What we're talking about, this global management system, it's not a global republic or a global democracy or a world government. It's global governance. It's the partnerships between political entities from all levels, county, state, federal, provincial, global, like UN, and the global corporations, with representation from what they call non-governmental organizations or civil society. Civil society, if you want representation in what they call global governance or their new world order, their words, you have to belong to a group. There's no individual anymore, just like there is no more nation state. So the Constitution has to go, which is why they don't preach it anymore in a lot of the school systems. Mostly California is a great example.
Right.
So what they do is you have to change people, and they start with the children. So it says you have to get into education. So what does this one come out with? First of all, the Global Neighborhood, Gro Harlem Brundtland says, and remember she wrote Our Common Future, she says, this is a path to a better world. Attending that conference or a contributor to this book, we have people from the USA. We also have Maurice Strong, who was a Canadian, a big shot into the United Nations at the time. He's the one that ran the Agenda 21 conference. Basically, him and Gorbachev and a few others and all the global participants, global corporation participants, they wrote the document. The people that showed up at the 1992 conference in Rio, they were there to just approve it without even reading it. And so what do they say about this? Oh, by the way, Jimmy Carter endorsed this. The commission objectives: promote security for the people and the planet, manage the global economy, reform the UN, strengthen the rule of law worldwide. Doesn't sound so bad until you read the book, and then you realize that, I live in a nation state, and they're telling me that I'm a nativist or I'm a nationalist. Sound familiar? Like Donald Trump, right? he gets in on this too.
And I was going to say, a lot of this, we have to make clear, this is not a Republican or a Democratic issue.
No, this is a globalist thing.
This is a globalist issue. And
It's a human
as you just,
issue.
It is.
It's a human and a human rights issue.
It's beyond politics because
Yeah,
they're bringing in
far beyond
non-government
politics.
organizations.
There are many in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party that are on for this. They have been, right? I won't name them at the time, but their names will come up, some of them, as we go through this. Okay, so you got this big conference going on in Rio. Here's a report on that conference. It's written by a guy called Daniel Sitars. And he writes, it's a very good book, by the way. He writes, Agenda 21 emerges as the main document of the conference. All nations signed it. As agreed on for a global plan of action, implementation of Agenda 21. And he says in the book here, Agenda 21 is a total management plan that covers all the Earth's resources, including the Earth's population. Control, manage. That's in the book. Now he goes on. Oh, by the way, the introduction to this book is written by Senator Paul Simon, who was at the conference. Al Gore was at the conference too, and was Senator John Kerry. We'll get into that. He's going to come up. You see, all of a sudden things are starting to connect.
After those three names.
So, that was in 1992. In 1993, Daniel Sitars becomes part of President Clinton's Sustainable America. This is the, this book actually, this is a report from the Clinton White House on sustainable development and Agenda 21, how the Clinton administration implemented it. Now, the book came out in 1998, well into Clinton's tenure as president. And it's called A Report from the President's Council on Sustainable Development. And what happened was, at this time, go back to 1993, Senator John Kerry comes back from the conference in Rio, and this introduces a resolution on the Senate floor asking the Senate to basically implement all the tenets of Agenda 21 into law. Mm-hmm. And I have that written here somewhere, but I'll get back to it. So Sitars writes in this book here.
But it ended up being implemented with an executive order by Clinton.
Clinton put it in by executive order, and that executive order was 12852. He's got a couple of dozen more that push sustainable development all through in his administration. Now, Ron Brown was his Secretary of Commerce at the time. He said, look, we don't need the Congress and the Senate. We can get 60% of this done just through the federal agencies via the regulation process. He passed away, Ron Brown did. So, by executive order, this one, 12852, President Clinton directed all federal government agencies to adopt and implement sustainable development principles and policies. Okay, and they've been doing it ever since. They've been on autopilot.
Now, they do this through some of our organizations, such as the EPA, the Environmental
Yes,
Protection Agency.
all of them.
And grants, right?
I have the document, the EPA document right here, and they use the grant system, also the regulatory process, which a lot of farmers found out and a lot of businesses found out all during the 90s. Like, all of a sudden, you're farming, and they say, you see that creek that's running through your field there?
It's ours.
It says, we don't want you to pollute that creek, so you can't farm within 1,000 feet of either side of that. Well, that eliminates a lot of farms.
Jim, just this past week, an article came out in TC Palm, November 8th. Army Corps lawsuit claims Martin County businessman damaged wetlands. His lawyer disagrees. And they're arguing about whether on his own private property he did some bulldozing, whether or not that water or the wetland connected to Bessie Creek. So,
well, I could tell you a good story about that, but I'm saving it to...
it's still going on. I mean, this is just current.
This has been going on.
So.
Paul Harvey used to talk about this back in the 90s, a lot. Every time something like that would come up, Paul Harvey would bring it up. A great man, great man. And it came back to, back then it was the Endangered Species Act was being used to shut down farms, businesses, but mostly farms. But family farms. The family farm was disappearing. Businesses were leaving the United States because of the regulatory process. Right. And then when you throw NAFTA on top of that, free trade agreement, they were leaving the country. That's part of this too. So where am I? Okay. This is one of my favorites. It's called Survival for a Small Planet, the Sustainable Development Agenda, edited by Tom Big. Now, what he did was he gathered all of these experts from all over the world to contribute to this book on sustainable development. All right, I think the book is 2004, but when the first part of the book, okay, this is the Sustainable Development Agenda, Part 1, Global Governance, okay?
Part 1.
And you get back into the back of the book here. What's going on down at the border, right? Did you know that open borders was part of the NAFTA agreement? And the NAFTA was written by globalists.
Really?
And approved. Oh, yeah. It's
Open
free
borders.
trade is a Agenda 21 thing.
Tenant.
So what do you got here? The link between migration, globalization, and sustainable development. Migration. They're not called illegal aliens, right? They're not called
That's right.
refugees. But in the borderless world that they're trying to create, there are no immigrants, because that means they have to come across a border. There's only migrants. And migrants are great for sustainable development because they can leave their poor countries, come to a richer country, and send money back home. But as Pat Buchanan pointed out back in the 60s, when you flood cheap labor into the United States, the union labor or even non-union labor, there's so much competition where the wages come down.
Right.
And then when you throw NAFTA on top of that says, we're going to incentivize you to close your factory and move it overseas. Now, I knew one of the vice presidents of Chrysler who worked under Lee Iacocca that pulled Chrysler out of the doldrums. And he told me when NAFTA passed, he says it was a disaster because they were already closing factories in Detroit and moving them down to Mexico. And he was opening them up down there. The Mexicans workers, and they were all women and young girls working in these factories because the men were coming over the border to work for a higher wage.
In the United States, right?
The wage for the Mexican factory workers was $5.80 a day, and the government mandated it. You can't pay any more than that. So he predicted that it was going to be a disaster. Got a call?
We do. Al, you're on the line. How are you doing today, Al?
Hi, Casey. This is Al Moskowitz. How are you doing?
Oh, good. How are you doing, Al? Always good to hear from you. Al is a really good patriot here in Treasure Coast and up there by Archie Seabreeze.
All right, Archie.
This is absolutely fascinating. I don't know how I managed to miss the details of this thing for so long, but I've heard the results of it and always scratched my head. So I've got a couple questions. And then I want to tell you something about the global warming research that I've done that's just kind of shocking. Whatever they're calling it, climate change, CO2, human activity causing the world to end, those kinds of things.
Cow farts.
That's right.
The Agenda 21, is this the impetus behind limiting things like collecting rainwater on your own property and
Yes.
Okay, so the ubiquity of solar power being on the grid, forcing it on the grid, things like that, all related to the same thing?
I don't quite follow the solar power thing.
Let me tell you about solar power real quick. I had my house. I wanted to get my house wired up for solar power, and for the very specific reason, I wanted to have a generator and solar power.
Right.
And the grid all feeding a bank of batteries that then go into an inverter and power the house.
Right.
I do not want to be on the grid with the solar power. The whole reason for having solar power is to have if we have a catastrophic event, so weather-wise here, and the power goes out all across, one of the stipulations if you're on the grid is you have to turn your solar power off when the grid is out because people might be working on it, things would be hot, and they get injured. So that was the answer I was given. But in the state of Florida, you cannot get solar power unless you're connected to the grid.
Well, it goes beyond that, and I can answer. This is Eric. I have 44 panels on my roof, a 30K battery bank. I have several inverters. and I do create my own power, and it's a fallacy that when the grid goes down, your solar power goes down. Mine actually keeps the farm going. We have to listen for the neighbors' generators to come on because we don't know that the power has gone out.
Where do you live?
Here in Martin County.
Okay. Well, I will tell you, maybe we can have an offline conversation about it, because I'll tell you what 3 different companies told me, and it's not that.
Well, the solar power thing, like you're talking about, like with FP&L now, we've got another 58 coal-fired power plants that we're getting ready to shut down, going back to your global warming, which is part of the climate change and the Agenda 21 and the Great Reset. It's their impetus to move everything over to this new technological environment. And yes, the big push for solar is related back to Agenda 21. They're trying to instill at local, state, and regional levels more sustainable development goals, because this thing filters down from a star chamber on the top through a group of world power leaders down into the Senate, the Congress, and each one of the nations, if they have one, and filters its way down into the local level and ties back by taking your freedoms back through grants and things like that. So yes, the solar is part of that push, and it's too bad because it's a good technology that could actually be used for good instead of for the wrong purpose at this point.
It would be fantastic if it were a little less controlled.
And I am by no means a green eco-liberal, if anybody knows me. Okay,
I didn't get that from you.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Let me say something briefly about global warming and this 97%. That's what I wanted to focus on a little bit. Casey and I have actually talked about doing a show about this, but I am one of these guys who, I don't know if it's an obsession or if it's just because I don't have enough to do, actually went out and pulled John Cook's entire study. There's 11,944 pages referenced, and I got all but I think 3 of the 64 that were ranked as number 1 in his criteria. And number 1 said, by the way, just in general for the rest of the listeners, I'm sure you guys know, these are papers that were written by, quote, climate scientists that take a position as it relates to AGW, anthropogenic global warming at the time is what it was called, human-caused climate change, mostly because of CO2 emissions. And the endorsement levels are 1 through 7, 1 being explicitly endorses and quantifies AGW as 50+% certain in the paper now. That's their interpretation of what the paper says. And all the way down to explicitly minimizes or rejects AGW as less than 50%. And there's gradations in the middle. Interestingly, and from a statistical fallacy standpoint, there's 11,944 papers. The first thing they did, 4 is no position. The ranking of 4 is no position. There were 7,970 people there. So what do? They take that out of the 11,944 sample space. So now there's 3,974 papers left. Of that, the first 3 endorsements amount to 3,896, which say explicitly endorses and quantifies it as 50+, or endorses it but does not quantify or minimize, or implicitly endorses it without minimizing it. So really, they're not saying anything other than we don't really know, and he's counting that number and dividing it by the total after he took out the ones that took no position, and that's where the 97% comes from. In reality, there are 64 papers out of 11,944 where someone mentions that AGW might be the cause. And I've read 62 of them. There's not one paper there that says anything close to that.
Yeah, but they'll use this as a foundational argument for things going forward, and that's just it. When you start to implement this, it's a science, it's a cult, it's a religion, and that speaks against it is discarded. And if you're not on board with it, you're not woke, you're not with the agenda, you're not moving forward, you're holding things up, you're going to be discarded. And that they've done away with the individualism in all of this and put a collectivism in place, and that's how you get away with doing this. And then they'll take it and say it's a group of experts, and they'll point to it as statistical fact, like they've done in these books that Jim is pointing towards here. So you're right on the money. Global warming is a big part of this. It was actually the catalyst that got this started.
Well, to support you guys, what I actually marvel at is how the global community has got the largest mass delusion in the history of humankind on this climate change thing.
It's a cognitive dissonance.
I'm loving what you're saying. I'm going to be quiet and listen for the rest of it. Casey, nice to talk to you.
You too, Al.
And thanks for doing a great
Nice
show.
to meet you,
Thanks,
Al.
guys.
Thanks, Al.
Nice to meet you.
You got it.
All right, let me just wrap up what I said previously. Free trade agreements, by their own words, were designed to deindustrialize the United States and ratchet down the affluent American middle class to a globally accepted level. Now, in the NAFTA agreement and all the other free trade agreements we signed since, in the preamble of their goals, one of the main goals is to promote sustainable development. The people that negotiated NAFTA in the United States also attended the Rio conference. So there's a crossover, and there's dozens of books written about NAFTA and sustainable development, right? It's called The Merging of the Economy and Environment in order to save the planet. I'm going to jump into education and run it real quick.
Yes.
How do you change people? You have to educate them. Here's a 2004 book, Higher Education and the Challenge of Sustainability. They got hundreds of these experts from all over the world to contribute to this book. And what they come out with, the consensus of the book is, all right, to advance the movement towards sustainable education in the schools. And the tools in the schools will include critical thinking skills and transformative learning. Goals also is to promote Agenda 21, promote the UN Decade of Education for Sustainable Development, which goes from 2005 to 2015, which was adopted by the National Education Association and also the Florida Education Association. I have the documents. And also to promote the Earth Charter. Now, the Earth Charter was put together by Maurice Strong and guys like Al Gore and Mr. Gorbachev. And it was Maurice Strong that said the Earth Charter would actually replace the Ten Commandments. And they actually had a ceremony at the United Nations where they put the Earth Charter in an ark and marched it through the United Nations.
This is the first I've heard of this, honestly.
I have the copy of the Earth Charter at home. This is the global religion, right? And it's out there. They're teaching it through various avenues. Okay, so education is set. They control it. I got 100 books at home from all these college professors and stuff that all they talk about is sustainable development. And you can buy them online for 50 cents. But my favorite one, and I ordered a copy of this for you, by the way.
Okay, thank you.
This is one of the most popular textbooks in the world, worldwide. This guy, Daniel Shiras, he's a guru. As a matter of fact, he's a lot like Eric. He lives off the grid. Organic farming.
I'm off the grid, all right.
And he doesn't drive a Volvo. This guy rides a bicycle. Okay.
I'm driving a pickup truck.
This is the 1994 fourth edition. The current edition is the 10th and it's still out there. But what they say in this edition, now remember, the conference in Rio just happened, and then you got to get this textbook. It takes a little while to get this textbook printed, but he has the inside track. He's very popular. So what is it? What does the book say? This is Environmental Science by Daniel Shiras, and it's the Action for a Sustainable Future. The book has two purposes: to educate the student on sustainable development and to develop critical thinking skills. Every chapter and every segment of the chapter has a critical thinking exercise, and then they go into discussion. So when you get into the last chapter of the book, it's called Sustainable Development and Government. Okay? Government in a Sustainable World. And then as you're going through the chapters, okay, they have basically, global government toward a sustainable world community, all right? Then he gives models of sustainable development, and then they have a discussion group, a critical thinking thing on that. And then they have Agenda 21. Now remember, Agenda 20, he's the first one to publish it. And it's in a college and high school textbook, a global college and textbook.
Okay.
So then it says, another segment in this chapter, strengthening international government. And then it says here, Okay, critical thinking exercise, creating a world government. In order to have a sustainable planet and to save the planet from destruction, we have to have a world government. Now that's the last paragraph in the book. Then it moves into the critical thinking exercise solution for the book.
They're going to teach you critical thinking and give you the solution.
The solution,
at
that's
end of
critical
it there.
thinking, right?
And they want you to talk about, in this critical thinking exercise, Agenda 21 and how it would pertain to a world government. Now, 1994, that's in the book. Another one of my favorites, real quick, is Rescue Mission Planet Earth, a children's edition of Agenda 21.
Oh my gosh.
Now, this book, according to the people that published the book, says the children of the world came together to put this, basically it's their book. They wrote it.
How
Which, when
dare
you look at
you.
this, there's no way these kids wrote it, right?
Of course.
Compared to some college textbooks today, this could be in college, right? Now, this is in 1994. It's the same as the previous book.
I think they rolled it out relatively quickly, considering the conference was in 92 and
okay,
textbooks are rolled out in 94.
Some of the main tenets of the book, 1994, remember now NAFTA passed in 1993, okay? Population. The world is overpopulated. So what they're telling the kids, and this is a quote out of the book, the planet groans every time it registers another birth. Now this is children, right? There's also a section in here on Local Agenda 21, how children can help implement Local Agenda 21.
How did we get local?
Good question.
I'll get into that, okay? Also, a great children's topic, free trade.
Every child
Free
wants
trade
to learn
and
about that.
how it pertains to sustainable development. And every time there's a section in the book, all right, where they bring up a topic like Local Agenda 21 or free trade, it gets into the main focus of the book, but tells the children this. You know, Simon says this and Simon says that, the game. This one says, Agenda 21 says local governments should draw up their own Agenda 21 policies, laws, and regulations in their districts. Okay. And in 1994, it says, by 1996, each local authority must present their local Agenda 21 program to the United Nations. That's for children. They didn't write that book. I'm going to jump ahead here. How much time we have? Okay. I'm going to skip a few things, but there are plenty of books on global governance.
Jim, can you touch base real quickly, too, on just the terms? It's amazing. I have a whole sheet here of terms that people don't realize when these terms are used. We're talking about Agenda 21. We're talking about sustainable development. Smart communities, livability principles. They sound great. Equitable housing, economic integration.
Let's go to that.
Okay.
First of all, that's all part of it. I'll get into. Let me just jump right into Martin County. Here.
Okay.
Quality of
Mixed
life
use,
versus
smart
standard
growth.
of living.
I'm gonna skip a few things there about
Endangered
global,
species.
but there are books on how to achieve globalism. But here, Martin County jumped early on the bandwagon in the late 90s, and they wanted to become a sustainable development community, a sustainable community. They had all kinds of little meetings and stuff throughout the county, which culminated in 2001 on February 1st and 2nd. I attended many of these things, asked questions. And then they stopped the Q&A period because of this conference. Can you see that? Can you read that?
Martin, a world-class county, global planning begins at home. February 1 to 2nd, 2001.
All right, it's your show. What question would you ask on that?
With that?
Yeah. Global planning.
Why are we talking global planning here at
Is there a global plan, and who wrote the plan?
Right.
Yeah, there is. Now, the keynote speaker there was a guy called Neil Pierce. And Neil Pierce, during the Q&A period, got hammered by one lady in the audience because during his presentation to Martin County, praising Martin County for their sustainable development programs, he said something to the fact that regulations for your communities will come from above. So during the Q&A, this lady in the audience, Erica Call, we became very good friends. She says, okay, So what does that mean? Regulations from above. Who's the above? And he's like, he couldn't answer the question. And she kept hitting him and hitting him and hitting him. And the above, she goes, is it above the United States government? And he goes, well, yeah, but we can't keep having it our own way. And he got all flustered and he left the stage. So Neil Pierce, he was the keynote speaker at that conference in 2001. 750 comes along.
Everybody remember 750?
He is a consultant to 750. Now, I have this is part of when Martin County was having the conferences and stuff, they were handing out, not Martin County, but people giving all the conferences, were handing out a local Agenda 21 dope sheet on how to achieve it. That's the actual handout. One for you, and I got one for you.
Oh, you give him.
So who's Neil Pierce? So who is this guy, Neil Pierce? Okay, I have a file on him here. Okay, so he oh, here he is. Here's a picture of him. It's not a good picture. He writes about sustainable communities and regional planning, and he gets up there and he writes all these articles, and they're all puff pieces. But he writes also for the trade, and one of the organizations he belonged to, and all of these articles are written back for the trade, the globalist trade, and this organization is called Alliance for Redesigning Government. So Neil Pierce writes these articles like a revolutionary Fourth, basically saying that the 4th of July should be replaced. Okay. He writes also gun control, a great year, and this is the year 2000, a great year for gun control. What's next? Okay.
Just out in Indiantown, you just had 4th of July wanting to be.
Yeah, well, we weren't going to celebrate the 4th of July in Indiantown because it was believed to be racist, and there was a proclamation that was put forward to replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day.
Right.
Just this year.
That's all part of it. That's in Agenda 21.
Well, and so are your garbage trucks with the natural gas and the buy-in from people like Sarah Hurd that really buys into the sustainable development pitch. And this goes beyond party lines, folks. These are people that have power, that have money, that have influence, and now have a plan and means to usurp the individual, usurp the Constitution, usurp the Bill of Rights. And when that's gone, good luck.
Stop right there, because you just made my point. Neil Pierce is a mouthpiece for these people. He got awards from the United Nations from all of his work towards sustainable development. Also, another one of his things for the Alliance for Redesigning Government, an article he wrote, Electoral College not dead yet. He wrote several more saying Electoral College must be abolished. You see the pattern? No Electoral College, no. And my favorite, the nation state, it's not dead yet? Question? Oh, now here's the guy that's a consultant to 750. He's not writing this stuff for you.
No.
He's writing it for them. Now, his best friend is this guy called J. Gary Lawrence. He was the other guy in the picture. J. Gary Lawrence was part of President Clinton's Sustainable Development Cabinet. He was also the chief planner in Seattle. And he's been involved in sustainable development. He's part of all these global organizations. And I'm going to wrap it up. You got the 2-minute warning.
Yeah, we got 2 minutes. I got a couple comments off Facebook.
J. Gary Lawrence, he's a big global player promoting sustainable development. And he's at a conference in London in the year 2000. It's called The Future of Local Agenda 21 in the New Millennium. Here's the actual document. So he's speaking to all of these people from all over the world. And he's praising them for their local Agenda 21 programs. But then he gets down to talking about a local Agenda 21 in the United States. And he says this, quote, in the case of the United States, our local authorities are engaged in planning processes consistent with local Agenda 21, but there is little interest in using the local Agenda 21 brand. Participating in the United Nations advocated planning process would very likely bring out many of the conspiracy-fixated groups and individuals in our society, such as the National Rifle Association, citizens' militias, and members of Congress. So we don't call it Local Agenda 21. What we call it is, okay, and he says also those people are fearing one world government. So we call a process something else, such as comprehensive planning, growth management, or smart growth. So what he's saying is all across the United Nations, we do not use the term local Agenda 21 or Agenda 21. We have to camouflage it.
Growth management comprehensive plans. Folks, we have got just 30 seconds left. James, the only thing I can say is we need to have you back. There's just so much more here to cover, and an hour is not
I'm more
enough.
than happy to do it. I got half the books here.
Al Moskowitz asked for a copy of all those books, the names of them, and we can certainly provide those.
Sure.
And
We can put 'em up on the
Alicia
Talk About
said
Martin page
we'll
for you.
put them on Talk About Martin. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, James, for walking us down the path of how we've gotten here and where progressive politicians want to take us, and support an America First platform and know who you're voting for. So I kind of abbreviated that a little bit. Next week, we're going to have some rock and roll in the house. We got Tony Stevens and Billy Levisay, so we'll see you then.
Forbearances, working remotely, internet shopping.